Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast is your one-stop shop for fantasy football news and advice. Can't decide on who to draft on the first round? Going gaga on how to line up your team. Got you covered. Traditional leagues, dynasty leagues, PPR leagues, IDP league, even daily fantasy football league. Join us as we break down all the questions of fantasy football. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast.
Hello and welcome back to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Ryan Basulto, and we are back on a lovely Monday if you live in California. I don't know what it feels like to live in places where their weather is all wacky, because I go to a place where they only choose the best weather. We are going to break down these new free agents that have went to new teams, and some free agents that stood on the same team that I'm actually a little surprised about. And these are fantasy receivers, fantasy running backs, so it's very important. It's a two-part segment I like to call New Faces, Same Places. We're going to go over the new faces on the new teams, and then we're going to go over guys who just stayed in the same place. It rhymes, so it works. And then we're going to go over some fantasy sleepers that I have. And if you stick around at the end of the show, we are going to talk about the basic tools that I can help you with your next fantasy draft. So first, we're going to start off with new faces. There's a lot of new free agents that went to some different teams in the past couple days. And I'm actually really surprised. And they have good fantasy implications going along with it. We are going to start off with Deshaun Jackson. He just joined the Los Angeles Rams. That was actually really surprising to me, because I didn't think that the Rams were looking to add another receiver, but I guess it makes sense after they lost Josh Reynolds. They wanted a guy to take off the top. They had the 22nd best fantasy offense next year, only averaging 23 points pretty much a game as a total on fantasy offense. They averaged 126 rushing yards. They threw for 250 yards a game, but that was all due to Jared Goff. We are now in the era of Matthew Stafford. Matthew Stafford is going to lead that team probably a little better. I mean, it wasn't that much of a difference when he led the Lions. He only gave them 6 more yards in the air, at 256 yards average per game. But I feel like Matthew Stafford with these weapons would be a lot better, and I feel like the line is a lot better too. You could tell with just the rushing numbers, the Lions have only rushed for 93 yards a game last year, while the Rams were averaging 126 yards on the ground. It just shows that their line's a little more stout, a little bigger, and a little better at stopping D linemen from crashing all the time. So I know that Matthew Stafford's going to thrive. Deshaun Jackson was actually really weird to me, because what's been happening the past couple years with D-Jax is that he gets hurt like right when you need him. He comes back and you're like, yeah, he's there for about 2 games. He just got me 20 fantasy points if you're playing PPR. And then all of a sudden he gets hurt. And you're like, what the heck? Like, I just put all my marbles in you. He only had 14 catches, 236 yards, and a touchdown last year. He only played the first 3 games. Then he got hurt the next 3 games. Then he played 1 game, got hurt again. Didn't play all the way till week 16, and then look, he got you 1 catch for 81 yards, a touchdown, and 15 fantasy points if you're playing PPR. Look, Deshaun Jackson, he's a great addition to the Rams as a whole when it comes to, if this was just the NFL football podcast, I would say, yeah, Deshaun Jackson going to the Rams, that helps, because I think he'll do more than what Josh Reynolds was doing, because they already have Van Jefferson there. Van Jefferson has already emerged, the rookie, that to prove that he's better than Josh Reynolds. Josh Reynolds didn't even have that good of a year. He only had 683 yards last year. I mean, that was pretty good, but Van Jefferson is showing that he's just as good because he's just as big. He's 6'5". That was his rookie year last year. He only had 19 catches, 220 yards, and a touchdown, but they're looking to open up a bigger role for him. That Rams offense is going to be not 22 this next year. I guarantee you they're not going to be the 22 ranked fantasy offense. They are going to definitely be a top 10 fantasy offense because Matt Stafford, as long as he does not get hurt, has all the weapons to do it. He has Robert Woods, who's been a top 15 receiver. Cooper Kupp, who's been hurt by injuries, but I mean, like I said, they have Van Jefferson. They still have Tyler Higbee. They still have other weapons. Robert Woods is the main guy now. So they're not worried about that. The Rams offense next year is going to be good. We were already talking about Josh Reynolds. He has now signed with the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans had the 4th ranked fantasy offense last year, but that's all due to the 168 rushing yards averaged on the ground by Derrick Henry mainly, and his 26 rushing touchdowns. Oh my goodness. Not him 26 rushing touchdowns, just the team as a whole, but 26 rushing touchdowns, 228 passing yards in the air is not as much, but still 33 touchdowns in the air from Ryan Tannehill and 7 touchdowns on the ground. 7 interceptions. That's a really good ratio. That means Josh Reynolds is going to get some quality looks. I think Derrick Henry has really emerged as the best running back in the league, especially with Zeke taking a step back from Dak Prescott being hurt, Christian McCaffrey being hurt, Saquon Barkley being hurt. Alvin Kamara could be good, but people are also a little weary just because now there's no Drew Brees. They don't know how the offense is going to look with that new Saints line and that new Saints quarterback. And they don't even know who the Saints quarterback is going to be. Is it going to be Taysom Hill? Is it going to be Jameis? Either or, you're not too sure. Derrick Henry's probably the best running back in fantasy and in the NFL. So now they're going to have to stack the box without Corey Davis. Josh Reynolds is going to be the number 2 guy now, alongside with A.J. Brown, which you're going to automatically have to double cover. There's no way, especially with Jonnu Smith not being on the team anymore. It helps a lot more for defenses because they're like, oh, now we don't have to worry about a really good pass-catching tight end. Now we're just going to focus more on A.J. Brown, who killed us all last year. And we're just going to be like, okay, we're going to double him. And then what are they going to have to do? They'll give it to Adam Humphries every once in a while, but that's not really their boy. As you could tell in last year's fantasy, like they would rather just either give it to A.J. Brown, give it to Corey Davis, and you know who the new Corey Davis is? It is Josh Reynolds. Corey Davis is now part of the Jets, though. It's a lot different for Corey Davis because now he has Sam Darnold as a quarterback, not as consistent as Ryan Tannehill. He had 65 catches for 984 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. He was a 28th ranked receiver in fantasy when it came to PPR. But I don't know if he's going to do as well on the Jets. I think he's going to digress a bit. I don't get the Jets. I think that even though they're adding Breshad Perriman, Corey Davis, and Jamison Crowder, I don't know if that's enough. I think it helps Sam Darnold more in the end because Sam Darnold's just going to have almost unlimited weapons. He has pretty much a lot of receivers. And then they got Keelan Cole too. So the new Jacksonville receiver, or the old Jacksonville receiver, is now a New Jersey, yeah, basically, New York Jet, who haven't won anything. If you watch Curb Your Enthusiasm, it makes me laugh because I was watching the episode the other day, and this guy, it's not funny, suicide's not funny, but he literally commits suicide just because the Jets lost. And he said, dang the Jets. And it just tells you how much the Jets stink and how you cannot trust the Jets for anything. They haven't made anybody happy since 1969. Like, let's just be straight up about it. That's just what it is. The Jets have been failure after failure after failure. I'm staying away from anyone on that offense. But Josh Reynolds is going to get that 65-catch, 984-yard production that Corey Davis got last year. I think he's going to either get 800 to 1,000 yards receiving. Just depends on how he grows in that offense. He's a big guy. He's over 6'3", so I mean, you can't teach that. It's really good. He's going to be able to be open in the end zone when you think that they're going to give it to Derrick Henry off of play action, which is one of the staples of that Tennessee Titans offense. Yeah, Josh Reynolds, new place, not in the same place. Let's talk about Kyle Rudolph, the guy who's always played for the Minnesota Vikings. I am really, really surprised that Kyle Rudolph actually switched teams, but I guess he's just tired of Kirk Cousins like we all are. Kirk Cousins doesn't win the big-time games. He helps you in fantasy if you're Dalvin Cook. If you're Dalvin Cook, he just really loves you. He loves you like a mother loves his baby. Like, he's not going to give it to anyone else besides him. And then, but Kirk Cousins also slings it outside too much, so that's why Kyle Rudolph was probably not liking it. He wants a guy who's going to make him a security blanket. I guess he sees the vision of the Jets. They added Adoree Jackson from the Titans, a really good cornerback out of USC. And I guess I just don't get like how the Giants are going to be good all of a sudden. They don't have Eli Manning. They don't have Tom Coughlin. They have Daniel Jones, who I gave all my hope in last year and completely failed me. Completely failed me. And now we have Kyle Rudolph on a 2-year deal worth $16 million. I don't see this helping Kyle Rudolph in any way, even though it's a new place. The Giants just were a bottom 2 offense, a bottom 2 fantasy offense too. Like it's awful. They threw only 13 touchdowns on the year, had 11 interceptions, threw 183 yards. 183 yards in the air. That is horrendous. The only team that's worse than that is, guess who? The Jets and the Patriots. The 2 teams that can't throw all year. The Jets stink and the Patriots just had a really off year and they really didn't care. They were just as surprised as I was that Tom Brady was going Psycho Tom. Because you hear the saying all the time, oh, don't count out Tom. Don't count that man out. And then what does he do? He just wins another championship. It doesn't make any sense. Another surprising flop is Phillip Lindsay, ex-Broncos running back. He is now on the Texans, and he's going to join an interesting cast of David Johnson, Mark Ingram, and now Phillip Lindsay. They are the worst 3-headed trio I've ever seen in my life. I do not want any part of any 3 of these guys, especially now that I know, not that I know, but I have a big hunch that Deshaun Watson is not going to play for the Texans next year, even if they keep him. David Johnson had 147 carries, 691 yards, and 6 touchdowns last year. Yes, he did give you over 10 fantasy points 14 times. Not 14 times. Lies. 8 times. And in the last 3 games of the season, he got 23, 28, and 20. So it might show that you're going to milk him. But David Johnson gets hurt consistently. He got hurt 5 times for 5 games last year. So he wasn't able to play 5 games due to COVID, due to his ankle injury, and it's always due to his legs. His legs are always the ones that give out on him. So why am I going to go to him? And then you're going to trust who? Mark Ingram, who rushed for 299 yards and 2 touchdowns last year. He only had over 10 fantasy points 2 times all last year with 15 and 10. If you're playing PPR. So if you're not playing PPR, he only went over 10 points 1 time in the Houston Texans game where he wins against a terrible, terrible Houston Texans defense. So, I just really don't think that this adds to anybody. Phillip Lindsay is probably the best one out of the backfields. He rushed for 118 carries for 502 yards and 1 touchdown. Only though, he's not a guy who finds the end zone all the time. And he's another guy who's also hit by injury woes every single time. And I think that's why the Broncos were kind of okay with just letting him go. Phillip Lindsay, yeah, joining the Texans is toxic. It's the top 2 worst franchise in the NFL today, behind the Jets, obviously, because I just can't stress how much you should stay away from anybody that's on the Jets. I get Jamison Crowder is going to do you good, but when you need him the most, oh, trust me, he's going to drop that iron hammer and just completely botch your fantasy season. The Texans, I don't see Deshaun Watson coming back, and I don't know why he would come back. Why would he come back? He doesn't have to. He makes money, and actually right now, since he's going under some alleged allegations, it's not looking too good for him just in general. He's got a lot of things to focus on, and I guarantee you that the last thing on his mind is to play for the Texans again next year. Fade the Texans still. Fade Phillip Lindsay. Let's talk about a huge free agent signing. Kenny Golladay, New York Giant. 4 years, $72 million. Once again, I do not get what the Giants are going for. I get what they're doing. They're trying to win a championship. But I just don't see how everyone's like, oh yeah, we're all in. So you have Darius Slayton now. You have Sterling Shepard, and you have Kenny Golladay, who I think is a top 7 fantasy receiver if he plays all year. Last year, he only played 4 games. Scored over 14 fantasy points in each of those games. And that's what he does. And then he didn't play for the rest of the year because he saw what the Lions were doing, and he said, yeah, no, I'm not going to be a part of that. I'm too great. I'm on pace to have better career than Calvin Johnson right now because I have more touchdowns through 30 games and I have more yards through 30 games on more catches. I played probably less games just because I didn't want to play for the Lions and I'm taking a stand unlike Calvin Johnson. But Kenny Galladay is a crazy good threat. If he plays next year, I see him going in the 4th round. Not by me, though. Not by me. But he's going to go in the 3rd or 4th round next year. I just don't trust the New York Giants. Giants are a team that the bright side to them is that the NFC East, and I can't stress this enough, they are so terrible. Like completely awful. We have the football team who has a great defense and has everything going for them, but what did they do? They got rid of Alex Smith. I hope they get someone good in the draft because right now they're just trusting on Heineke, and it's the same thing as Alex Smith, if not worse. And then, they got Ryan Fitzpatrick. And then look, you're going to rely on Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has never won one playoff game. Not one. He's played 16 years in the NFL, hasn't won one playoff game. So then you got they're finicky over there. Besides that fantasy offense. Oh, that fantasy offense is going to be good. But I'm talking about just playing against these teams. Then you got the Cowboys over here who think they're the big boy on campus because they got Keanu Neal with Dan Quinn. I don't know if that's really the answer. I think they're still a 7-9 team especially if Dak Prescott can't stay healthy. If they can't stay healthy, yeah, they'll go 9-7. I'll be proud of them. But that's about it, though. And then we got the Eagles, who are all over the place, and I just completely have given up on the East Coast Raiders. I'm all out on the East Coast Raiders. If there's anyone I'm getting on that team, it's Jalen Hurts, and that's just because I didn't draft a quarterback, and I'm taking a flyer on him, and I know he's going to rush for a lot of yards and do a lot of crazy stuff because no one has a real big they haven't seen a lot of tape on him. And then they're going to implement more stuff with the new coach with Jalen Hurts. So the Giants are going to have a lot of future and a lot of promise to at least do some damage, at least with Kenny Galladay. Daniel Jones, he gets hurt a lot, though, because this guy likes to run, and if you're a running quarterback, it doesn't matter who you are. If you're RG3, Russell Wilson, Patrick Mahomes, on occasion, you're going to get hurt. Russell Wilson is blessed, actually, not to get hurt. But if you're Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow and the latter, you're going to get hurt more times than not. Kenny Galladay, as long as he has a good quarterback throwing it to him, they're going to milk him. They're going to milk him all the time because Sterling Shepard gets hurt a lot. Darius Slayton's on the other side, and he could take the top off easy as a rookie. It's not a matter if Kenny Galladay is good. It's a matter if the New York Giants could actually be a team you could trust and a team that is trustworthy. A team that I think is trustworthy and that actually got a steal, and I didn't even know this was coming, Will Fuller going to the Miami Dolphins. On a 1-year deal, Will Fuller, I guess, sees the picture on the Miami Dolphins. The only thing about Will Fuller that just always makes me weary about drafting him every single year is that he constantly does you great. In the first 7 games of the fantasy season, he dropped at least 10 fantasy points. Besides one game, all but one game, he dropped at least 10 fantasy points. And then what does he do? Gets hurt, and then he comes back, tries to come back, but he's only a shell of himself, and then he doesn't do as well. But Will Fuller is someone you just can't rely on. Why would you want someone who is going to get you a couple wins, but is not going to be there all the time consistently? Because the best ability is availability. Just what I've always believed in. If you're constantly there, you're constantly putting the work in, you're Travis Kelce, you're players like that, you are going to more likely get my vote on wanting to draft you. Will Fuller is someone who gets hurt, but he also does have a lot of upside because they have Myles Gaskin in the back. They have Tua, who's now getting another year with Brian Flores in that playbook. They were able to get people like Jakeem Graham open. So Will Fuller should be fine. I think Will Fuller will get 1,000 yards. Another person I'm not drafting because you have to draft him high. If you're getting Will Fuller, you're getting him at least in the 3rd, 4th round. Because Will Fuller is going to get you 1,000 yards probably next year. And the thing is, he's a touchdown machine. He's going to get you 1,000 yards, at least 11 touchdowns. It's going to help the Seahawks. New face. They got Gerald Everett. The Rams ex-tight end switched up on him and went to Russell Wilson on the Seahawks on a 1-year deal worth $6 million. I guess the Rams couldn't pay him. Probably only wanted to pay him like $2-3 million. He said, no, I'm not going to do that. look out for Gerald Everett when it comes to fantasy football. Gerald Everett is not someone to play with because now he has not Jared Goff, not just any average quarterback. He has Russell Wilson, who averaged 246 yards in the air, which isn't the most, but 40 touchdowns. 40 touchdowns to 13 picks. That's consistent touchdown to interception ratio. I know he started to fall off at the end, but you know Gerald Everett's going to get those touchdown loves because Chris Carson's unreliable. He's going to get hurt, who we're going to talk about later too. They have a trio of running backs like Carlos Hyde, Rashad Penny, and everyone else who constantly get hurt. So you can't rely on them. Then Tyler Lockett has a leg injury at least one time a year. So he always starts out hot, starts good in the beginning of the fantasy season, and then starts to fizzle. And they have good old DK Metcalf, who's going to warrant most of the attention, especially from a safety playing over the top. Gerald Everett is going to help the Seattle Seahawks. I would get him in the 10th round. If he's in the 10th round and you need a tight end and you're like, oh man, all the good ones are gone, get Gerald Everett. Gerald Everett is looking like he's going to get you 50-something catches, over 600 yards, 7 touchdowns. Russell Wilson is going to have finally a consistent, good pass-catching tight end in the red zone. It's going to help him a lot. New face, different place. Panthers signed Seahawks, David Moore. So they just snagged David Moore, the ex-Seahawk, who was also another guy who would take the top off. He is known for getting the Hail Mary against the Packers. David Moore is a good guy that's going to help out Robbie Anderson and fill the void of Curtis Samuel because he's not as versatile as Curtis Samuel, but he knows how to be used a lot as well because in that Pete Carroll offense, they also have you run wide receiver end around, so you're getting the wide receivers getting rushes. David Moore had three rushes last year. Not too many yards, but he still had 3 rushes last year. He knows how to do the Curtis Samuel type of gadget player role. Then they're going to have DJ Moore on the outside with Robbie. It's going to help that Panthers offense a lot. If they were able to get Deshaun Watson, bless that Panthers fantasy offense because it would just shoot through the roof. It would be the top fantasy offense in my book, right over the Kansas City Chiefs. Those were new faces, different places. Now we are going to talk about, when we come back from the commercial, the people who stayed in the same place and their fantasy implications. Remember to stick around at the end of the show. I will give you the basic tools and knowledge, and we'll go over some terminology in fantasy football so you can know and be comfortable in next year's draft when you decide to become a champion, because that's what we do here. We make people champions at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines. They got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hey everybody, thanks for still listening to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I am still Ryan, and we are back to talk about some of the people in free agency who decided to stay in the same place. We just talked about all the new faces that left in free agency. There was a lot of them. Will Fuller, Kenny Galladay. All these guys are going to have a lot of fantasy impact. Gerald Everett. I'm more wary on Kyle Rudolph. Josh Reynolds has more potential than the bunch, I guess. But David Moore, Deshaun Jackson, those guys are just going to help those fantasy offenses a lot more, especially those fantasy quarterbacks, especially Teddy Bridgewater. I mean, or anybody who's on the Texans. Those guys need help as much as they can. So we're going to talk about the people who stayed put, the people who said, no, I'm going to stay. I'm not going to leave. No matter what the media says, no matter what the media says is more enticing, I am going to stay on the same team. I'm going to Kobe Bryant it. So we are going to talk about the people who stayed on the same team during free agency. Same place. Juju Smith-Schuster. He re-signed with the Steelers on a 1-year deal. And what makes this more interesting is that Juju was offered more money. They haven't specified the amount, but he was offered more money according to Adam Schefter from Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Kansas City. So let's just break it down from those 3 teams. Juju Smith-Schuster had a decent year last year. I wouldn't say that it was breakout or anything close to that because he's been trying to be the number 1 receiver for a while. He had 97 catches, 831 yards, and 9 touchdowns. He was a 17th ranked PPR receiver. His stats through 4 seasons are really good because he started young, so now he's going to barely be going into his 5th season where he's going to be 24 now. He's at 308 catches, 3,726 yards, and 26 touchdowns. That's good, but since Big Ben has been getting older, they're limiting how much he uses the deep ball or how much can he use the deep ball really what it is. Because Big Ben, first of all, doesn't have the healthiest of diets, so obviously he doesn't take care of his body all the time. But Big Ben has been only throwing to Juju Smith-Schuster every single time, pretty much in the past 100 targets, 8 yards per catch. So he's only throwing it to him within in-route difference, which is of 1 through 10 yards. It's not really you're going deep down the field. And then in 2020, he had a career low at 5.6 yards per catch. He is not getting either open, and they have to do little, short slant routes to kind of just give him some separation, or he's just not getting the ball deep because Big Ben also sees that there's more potential in his other weapons. Chase Claypool, I see a lot of potential going into next year. He had 62 catches, 873 yards, 9 touchdowns. Scratch that. Next year, he's definitely going to have over 80 catches, over 1,000 yards, and 9 touchdowns. I would even give him 11 touchdowns next year. He was a 22nd ranked fantasy receiver last year. I guarantee you, next year he's going to be top 20. I would even say top 10. I would draft him over Will Fuller, not A.J. Brown. A.J. Brown's a man. DK Metcalf, no. Tyler Lockett, I draft him over easily. He's someone I would get in the 3rd and 4th round if someone was kind of eyeing him and I kind of noticed his ADP is kind of high. We'll explain what ADP is and what everything else is at the end of the show. Make sure you stick around so I could break down all the terminology so you're not lost in your next year's fantasy football draft. But Chase Claypool is definitely someone to watch out for. And I didn't even mention Deontay Johnson. Deontay Johnson, the slot last year, had 88 catches, 900 yards, and 7 touchdowns. And that was him hurt still. That was still him being hurt from his ankle injuries. And I think 1 game was from COVID. Everything else was him playing. He got at least 10 fantasy points, 9 out of the 16 games. Like I said, 88 catches on one end, 62 catches for Chase Claypool, and then 97 for Juju. That's a lot to go around, but it seems like when he was going more of the deep ball, he was going to Chase Claypool and Deontay Johnson on like the 20-yard routes. They all got an even amount, 9 touchdowns each. Juju is thinking that he's going to not leave. He's going to try to stick around with the same team. But imagine if he was on the Ravens. The Ravens had Lamar Jackson, and they just gave Juju those in routes that they usually give Marquise Brown. That'd be easy. It'd be really, really easy for Juju to get open. I think Juju would actually be a better receiving option than Marquise Brown, because I don't think Marquise Brown is all of what the hype is around. What if he was on the Chiefs, who had the number 1 offense last year and the number 1 fantasy offense last year too, averaging the most points per game. Actually, number 2, behind the Green Bay Packers. But you get what I mean. They're still one of the top offenses. Imagine if they added Juju alongside Tyreek Hill, who was a top 2 fantasy receiver last year, and Travis Kelce, the number 1 fantasy tight end all last year. Travis Kelce is just the best tight end you could get because they're going to keep him in the game all game because he blocks really well and he's huge. And he knows how to catch the ball besides in the Super Bowl against Tom Brady. But everything else, he's pretty much doing. Imagine if Juju was there. Juju, McCole Hardman in the slot. Juju would definitely at least get 1,000 yards just because we've seen what he's done with an elite receiver, which now we have to give Antonio Brown. Antonio Brown proved it when he won the Super Bowl, proved it when he scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Antonio Brown is someone who's actually, I don't know if he's even going to stay in the same place because he's kind of looking like Seattle might be a good option. I think he wants money. The Bucs don't have it because they gave everyone else, but he wants money. Juju is someone that's, I guess, staying loyal and staying on the same team. I don't get why he wouldn't go to the other teams because I think the other teams had more to offer him. Like they had more, hope. I think Patrick Mahomes, better quarterback. Lamar Jackson, better quarterback than Big Ben now. And then Philadelphia, okay, I could see why he didn't want to go there. Philadelphia is the East Coast Raiders, and you don't want that. But Juju was a top 17 receiver, still 97 catches last year. I guess you just know what you're getting with him. You're getting him if it's a 10-man draft, you're getting him in the 10th round, 11th. I'd rather just get Gerald Everett at a tight end and try to take a flyer on a tight end that's lower in the stock than try to get Juju. I'd rather try to get one of the rookies. I'd get Jamar Chase way before I'd get Juju. Hands down. Not even a decision. Darius Slayton. I'd also get Darius Slayton over Juju. I like his potential more too, especially since Kenny Galladay's lined up on the other side. Darius Slayton's going into his 3rd year. He has a lot of potential too. Juju Smith-Schuster is someone who stood put, but he's got to stay where he is, and you just got to stay away because there's too many weapons there. Big Ben's like, no, one last ride. He's like The Undertaker. One last ride. Every single time, and everyone's like, not respect him as much as The Undertaker. That's the problem. They're like, no, old man, you're done. Get out of here. They're trying to shoot him like they're shooting Drew Brees, or they already shoot him out in New Orleans. But yes, Juju decided to stay in the same place. He's not going nowhere. I think he had a lot of potential everywhere else, but we'll see how he does as the number 1 receiver again. But I think Chase Claypool is going to take that spot. Another guy who's staying in the same place, which I don't understand, is Marlon Mack. He re-signed to a new deal, which is crazy. Why? Marlon Mack just saw what they were doing with Jonathan Taylor, Nyheim Hines, 2 very viable fantasy options. Marlon Mack re-signed a 1-year, $2 million deal. So I guess he sees what's happening, and he's like, okay, I'll take over what Jordan Wilkins did. I'll get like the every, now and then goal line run. I'm probably gonna play a big factor with Jonathan Taylor. Me and him are gonna share carries, but you lost the job, dude. You got hurt last year. You only had 4 rushes for 26 yards. You thought that it was going to be the Marlon Mack show, and then Jonathan Taylor was going to slowly emerge because you saw his potential in college. But no, Marlon Mack stayed put. Marlon Mack, the poor guy, he had no chance from the start because I was literally drafting Jonathan Taylor in the 5th, 6th round already. Because I knew if as soon as Marlon Mack would get hurt, like he does every year, at least one time or two, that Jonathan Taylor would be right there, ready to take all the carries, ready to be behind the best line in the NFL. Marlon Mack is someone who you just wouldn't rely on. He's in the same place, and yes, he was a top 20 running back. Maybe, no, he was top 15. Top 15 2 years ago. Over 1,000 yards. You can't blame him. I mean, they ran a good rush offense, and Frank Reich knows how to run a good offense as well. Which they also think Carson Wentz, talking about a different face, they think Carson Wentz is the guy, and they think that he's going to go back to MVP caliber. I don't see it. And if I don't see that, then I don't get why Marlon Mack is going to go back to being anything he was close to being at one point. Marlon Mack, you're staying in the same place, but I don't think anybody should even touch you with a 10-foot pole. The next person who is staying in the same place, Chris Carson, one of the legendary and worst Chris's I've ever drafted this year. I drafted Chris Godwin and Chris Carson with my 2nd and 3rd pick in the fantasy draft that just passed this past year, and I traded both of them during the season because I don't believe in the Chris's. But Chris Carson is good. When he plays, He's very good, but the problem is he only had 141 carries, 681 yards, and 5 touchdowns on that Seattle defense that is not even a top 5 fantasy football offense. So the not being a top fantasy football offense, along with the injuries, along with it's not even like you had 200 carries. You only had 141 carries. I understand you did have 30 catches on the year, but still, that only means 170 touches. Zeke touches the ball a million times. Touches it over 300 times. Derrick Henry touches it over 300 times. I'm comparing you against the best running backs because that's what you're supposed to be. Chris Carson has a lot of potential because when he's out there, he at least gets you 12 fantasy points if you're playing PPR. At least that's what he gets you. Most he gets you 20 because he scores a touchdown catching and a touchdown rushing. That Seattle offense is made and geared to run and churn the ball. Chris Carson is a big staple in that when he's healthy, but I noticed as I've drafted him the past 3 years that this guy has a hard time staying healthy. It's always a foot injury. And foot injuries are the worst because how do you run without your feet? So you're just going to keep re-aggravating that injury, especially as a running back. Think about it. Running backs always are cutting, always have to stop on a dime. That's a lot of pressure you have to put on the ball point of your feet. You're going to be re-injuring your foot all the time. Or let's not forget, in the middle of NFL tackles or in the middle of huddles, when people are twisting running backs' ankles and doing dirty plays like that. So Chris Carson is someone who is good, but please don't get him like I did in the 3rd round. Wait till the 6th round. Get him where everyone got Mark Ingram last year. Get him that late because I know he's part of still a top 10 fantasy offense. Russell Wilson is still one of the best quarterbacks in the league, but what if he doesn't re-sign? That's another big factor. Russ still hasn't decided where he wants to go. I know the Bears may have made the legendary push on Andy Dalton and got him for 1 year, $10 million, but they could still break the bank even harder to try to get Russell Wilson. You never know. If Russell Wilson gets aggravated enough in that climate, in that situation, which is the Seahawks, which I also don't think, me and the Seahawks don't give Russell Wilson enough respect because I think that he's not as good as everyone makes him sound, but he's still a top 5 quarterback. He's just not like, wow, this is the best thing I've ever seen in my life. Like, no, chill. Randall Cunningham, Dante Culpepper. People have done this before. Like, but he went to a Super Bowl. Yeah, he went to a Super Bowl and lost because he decided to make a dumb decision on the goal line with that slant route. He could have easily kept the ball or done anything else with it. Oh, but what about the one he won? Yeah, you mean the one where the Broncos just completely fell apart and that defense completely destroyed them? Percy Harvin even returned a touchdown. Russell Wilson had he had 3 touchdowns. He had 3 touchdowns, but come on. That was the glory days of Jermaine Kearse, Doug Baldwin, and young Tyler Lockett. They knew what they were doing. And they had that type of culture over there with Pete Carroll. They were ready to win there, and me and the Seahawks just don't give Russell Wilson enough credit. So that's why I do not think that Russell Wilson would even come back. Why would he come back if no one just respects him? But it's kind of hard to just, upheave your family and leave. But his wife is also Sierra, who's someone who'd want to bounce. Chris Carson is a big Russell Wilson is a big factor in how good Chris Carson's going to do next year. It could be good, could be bad. That's the chance. Just for the simple fact that without Russell Wilson there, what if people stack the box more? And what if they try to take out the threat of the run because they know that all the Seahawks do is run, play action, go deep to DK or go deep to Tyler Lockett. It's not that hard of a playbook. DK's already exposed it in an interview. He said, wow, people already know our plays. Like, we're just literally run, go deep, run, go deep. Nothing really complex about it, so it's time to change it up. By week 11, people already were figuring us out. That's why last year you saw the Seahawks fizzle and lose 4 out of the last 5 games. No, 3 out of the last 5 games. It's just, it's all based off Russell Wilson. And Chris Carson will help out, but don't draft him like I did first 3. Wait for him in the later rounds. Another guy who's staying, which may not be a big factor, but I think he could be a sleeper. Rashard Higgins. He is staying on the Cleveland Browns for at least another year. 37 catches, 599 yards, and 4 touchdowns last year. Yes, that wasn't the most impressive stat line, but Baker Mayfield is getting more acclimated to the Steven Stefanski offense, which is an efficient offense, and it, just like Sean McDermott, is bringing the best out of his quarterback, bringing the best out of Baker Mayfield. because they're not trying to expose him as much by trying to run the ball more. Okay, what if we run it with Nick Chubb most of the time, and then the other times we run it with Kareem Hunt? But also doing that, let's throw it to Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt half the times we throw, so then at least we're getting those big yardage plays because those guys are constant playmakers. Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt always are a viable threat, and they have to bring the safeties in the box because of them. And you don't know what's going on with Odell Beckham. He could get hurt again. He's gotten hurt the last 2 years. This guy constantly wants to go in and out. I don't know if he wants to come back to the Browns. What if there's the rumors he wants to go to the Bucks. This guy is what the Migos call wishy-washy. You don't even know about him. And Jarvis Landry, yes, he is the main guy, but it's just him. And that's him. And then I think that the Browns would actually work more efficiently, and hopefully they figure this out too, that if they only had Rashard Higgins at the 2 and Jarvis Landry at the 1, Jarvis Landry's the number 1 receiver. They don't need Odell Beckham and to pay him all this money. They could just keep refilling what they're doing on the defensive end, or even just get maybe another receiver at a discount that could complement Jarvis Landry and Rashard Higgins better than someone who wants the ball forced to him at least 100 targets a year in Odell Beckham. Rashard Higgins is someone who decided to stay, and I think that helps out Baker Mayfield's fantasy value as well. Baker Mayfield's someone who threw over 25 touchdowns last year and less than 10 interceptions. I'm really surprised by the underbake because I wrote him off like Daniel Jones. Like I did Daniel Jones this year. I have no faith in the underbake. I'm like, wow, this guy is really being underwhelming. He's doing all this like locker room dancing stuff, but then when it comes to like the big games, he doesn't ball out. But let's not forget, he almost beat Patrick Mahomes. He only lost to Chad Henne, and he threw for over 3,500 yards last year. He was on his way to do it after Baker Mayfield kind of only gave you over 20 fantasy points one time in the first 11 weeks. He gave you 18, 28, 29, 20. He was clicking more with the Browns offense. Yes, he struggled against the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Jets for some reason, but that was just a real washy game. Baker Mayfield's getting closer and closer to acclimated in this offense. Rashard Higgins is going to be a big focal point because Austin Hooper and Njoku are two people who also can't stay healthy. So I think that, Rashard Higgins is someone you could get in like the 11th round. Somewhere where you would get Josh Reynolds is where you could also get Rashard Higgins. He could also be someone who would be a good flyer if Odell Beckham stays hurt, leaves, or maybe they just only have Rashard Higgins because he is a touchdown threat as well. He's a big target and he has good hands. He's been on the Browns for a while, so they really, really like him, so they're not going to get rid of him. Baker Mayfield, 17th ranked quarterback last year, probably going to be ranked in the top 15 this year. He's going to keep getting better. He's young. The underbake, I'm already talking about the underbake? That's awful. Should not be talking about Baker Mayfield and that Sooner like that boomer Sooner. When we come back, I'm going to talk about some sleepers that I have. I have some good sleepers. I think Clyde Edwards-Helaire in particular is someone that I'm really going to get into. And then at the end of the show, we're going to go over the basic tools and stuff to help you prepare for your next year's fantasy draft. We are champions. Don't forget that. We make champions on this podcast. We'll be right back after the commercial break.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
We are back, and thanks for listening once again to the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. We just talked about the new faces and the people who stood at the same places during free agency. Some of your favorite players or some players that you know left their favorite teams or the teams that they're playing for, like Kenny Galladay and Will Fuller. And some people stayed on the same teams that you didn't think were going to stay, like Chris Carson, who could have went to another team like the Chiefs, maybe the Ravens. Could have went to a lot of different teams other than re-signing with the Seattle Seahawks or Juju. Juju could have went to the Ravens, Philadelphia, or Kansas City as well. A lot of people in free agency. So this is where champions are made. And this is why we talk about all this stuff the whole year round on the Fantasy Football Podcast. Now, we are at the point of the show where we're going to talk about the fantasy football sleepers. Yes, the people who you were sleeping on all last year, like Justin Jefferson, who erupted for over 1,400 yards, and the guy I drafted in the 11th round, or was it Antonio Gibson, who ended up being a stud towards the end of the year, who I drafted in most of the leagues that I was in, and I traded for him in one of the leagues I was in, or was it James Robinson, who I also picked up in my league too, but I ended up trading him for Stephon Diggs, so it ended up working out in my favor. But all these guys were all sleepers. People were not expecting it. You didn't expect James Robinson to go crazy with the Jacksonville Jaguars. You didn't expect Antonio Gibson. You didn't expect the football team to have a really, really good defense compared to what they were last year. And then they had Alex Smith this year, so you didn't know how he was going to do after the injury. Of course, the comeback player of the year did good, brought them to the playoffs at 9-7. They were actually taken over by Tyler Heineke, but it's going to be Ryan Fitzpatrick and Tyler Heineke out there for Antonio Gibson. So now you see that one more, at least. But before, you weren't seeing these guys, and you just were just thinking, oh, whatever. And Justin Jefferson, he was a rookie. You didn't even know about if he was going to be able to translate what he did at LSU to the pro level. But he did. He did what he did. And I have a lot of fantasy sleepers right now. I got Logan Thomas going into next year. He was the number 3 tight end, so I guess he's not much of a sleeper. But I feel like people like Darren Waller, Travis Kelce, and George Kittle a lot more. When I don't think you should like, besides Travis Kelce, more. Logan Thomas had 72 catches, 670 yards, and 6 touchdowns in that Ron Rivera offense that loves to just give it to tight end, running back, one receiver. That one receiver is Terry McLaurin. The one tight end is going to be Logan Thomas. The running back is going to be Antonio Gibson / probably Curtis Samuel playing a gadget role, also getting the ball sometimes. But with this, Logan Thomas has everything it takes to get wide open. You can't double Logan Thomas too much because, first of all, Logan Thomas isn't the type to be getting the ball quite frequently as a George Kittle or Travis Kelce. He's just a security blanket on third down. And he's also a big touchdown threat. Like I said, he had 6 touchdowns last year. He wasn't picking it up towards the end of the year when I picked him up in fantasy. He dropped 13 against Dallas on week 12. And then from there on out, it was just scoring. He scored 1, 2, 3 touchdowns in the last 7 weeks of the NFL season. He had 13 fantasy points, 24, 10, 23, 13, and 12 fantasy points. He didn't do you dirty at all. Going towards the end of the fantasy year, one game was even 13 catches, 101 yards against that horrendous Seattle defense. But what if he's just only good against Seattle defense and not against real defenses? And the NFC East doesn't even have good defenses. It has the Eagles, the Cowboys, and then the football team's the best one. And I guess the Giants are revamping with the Dory Jackson and friends. But I still don't buy it. Oh, what about when Logan Thomas went against the Pittsburgh Steelers for 9 catches, 98 yards, and a touchdown for 24 fantasy points? Logan Thomas is going to be someone that is going to be a top 2 fantasy tight end. You'll be able to get him at good value at like the 6th pick if you want a good tight end because they're very hard to come by. Or you could just wait it out and see if you get Kyle Pitts later down, the Florida product, who might do better. But I think Logan Thomas is a heavy. Do not sleep on him next year. He's a heavy sleeper next year. Someone that I said was a sleeper before this year, and I'm going to say a sleeper again because last year's numbers didn't show what this man really should have done. DJ Moore. He had 66 catches, 1,100 yards, 1193 to be exact, and 4 touchdowns, making him the 24th ranked fantasy PPR receiver. Look. This guy had a bad year, and he still caught 1,100 yards. He caught 1,100 yards, over 1,100 to be exact, on only 66 catches. Next year's production should be way higher. I mean, he started out the year good with a 20-point performance, and then he just went 8, and that's not good enough, folks, because for people who aren't playing PPR and just drafted DJ Moore, on one of this, it's 2 catches for 65 yards. That's only 6 fantasy points. That's not 8. So it's even less, and then you're looking at him like, what is this guy even doing? So you're like, yeah, he gave me 20, and then he gave me 19, 14, 25, but then he gave me 7, 3, and that's all a product of Teddy B. So I think it would really help, too, if they got Deshaun Watson. I mean, what wouldn't help? Deshaun Watson is the ultimate Band-Aid on any type of offense. He had the number 1 passing yards in the league last year with the Houston Texans. Yes, the Houston Texans, who had David Johnson at running back. They got rid of Nuke Hopkins, his best receiver that he ever could have played with. And Nuke Hopkins isn't even washed. I don't know why they would have traded for David Johnson, but that was the Bill O'Brien era, the Bob era. And then they had Will Fuller, who was pretty much hurt most of the time, and then Kiki Kute. Are you Kute? Yes, they had that guy. So they didn't have much to work with. But if Deshaun Watson were to go on this Panthers offense, it would at least help DJ Moore's production, not even a little bit, a lot. He would be going from an 1,100-yard season to a 1,400-yard season. Next year, I see DJ Moore getting 85 catches, 1,300 yards, and look, there's a lot of weapons, and Christian McCaffrey might come back, so that's going to take away from his touchdown rates. But, I mean, he's going to get all the long balls. He's going to get a lot of receptions because he gets open and he's a good receiver. DJ Moore is someone who's highly slept on. I don't think people are going to want him as much as Robbie. And, yeah, they're not going to want him as much as Robbie or even Christian McCaffrey, obviously, who's going to go off in the top couple rounds, which I'm very curious to see because Christian McCaffrey is going to come back to form as soon as he comes back. That's what he does. He's going to score 20 to 50 fantasy points a game just because he defies all logic, and that playbook defies all logic by just only giving it to him. But DJ Moore, he's going to have a better year next year. I know it. I feel it. This year was just not one of those years. They didn't know how to acclimate all the receivers together. They didn't know how to give it to Robbie perfectly, with Curtis Samuel perfectly, with him perfectly. Now they have these 2 guys. They're going to be able to go. And I just hope Teddy Bridgewater isn't the quarterback, because Teddy Bridgewater is probably going to give him a better year, but not that much better as another quarterback would. So hopefully they get someone in the draft. Trey Lance, man. Trey Lance is someone to look out for. Or maybe even Justin Fields, because people even are getting sour on them, because now people want Trey Lance, Trevor Lawrence, and Zach Wilson. Another sleeper I have going into next year. Yes. Sleeper. Chase Edmonds. Going into next year. Chase Edmonds only had 97 carries for 448 yards and a touchdown last year. He played more of a secondary role and a backup role when Kenyon Drake was hurt. But Kenyon Drake's gone now. And I know Kyler Murray's the best running back in the league, but that's going to warrant a lot of attention. And they got to know that they're not going to be able to do all this with Kyler Murray every single year. We just talked about it on last week's show about what RG3 did and how he was trying to rush it too much. And what happened to him? His production fell off like crazy just for the simple fact that he was using his legs too much. And you can't rely on your legs all the time, okay? You can't get mobile because these guys are out to hurt you. There are people like Greg Williams out there that will give a bounty for this guy to twist your ankle, to make sure he gives you a dirty tackle you from behind, anything to bring you down. They will bring you down. Defenders are grimy. I know. I used to play defender in high school. Who cares how I'm going to bring you down? I'm bringing you down. But they're going to worry about that with Kyler Murray. So they got to worry about, is Kyler Murray, he's young. Should we just keep milking him, or should we use him efficiently more like Russell Wilson, per se? That's why Russell Wilson's having a better year or more longevity, just for the simple fact that they know when to run with him. He runs decisively and smart. He doesn't run and try to make spin moves, hit the brake and go stop on a dime, take it upfield. He tries to run efficiently. He gets the yards he gets, slides. Aaron Rodgers does the same thing to an extent. Kyler Murray needs to start doing that more, so maybe they'll rely on Chase Edmonds more. Kyler Murray is still a young quarterback in a tough NFC North. And I can't, reiterate this, tough. It's one of the best conferences and divisions. It's the best division in probably all of football. They have the Rams, who just added Matt Stafford, and their defense is one of the best defenses in the league. Then they got the Niners, who are getting the Bosa brother back. They're getting their defense back. The only reason they stank last year was because Super Bowl winners just statistically don't do, or Super Bowl losers statistically don't do good the following year. It defies all logic. It doesn't make sense. The Niners had their year. It's time for them to come back. They're a really good team. They have a really good coach in Kyle Shanahan. So now, Kyler Murray has to worry about all these defenses. The Seattle defense isn't the best defense. I'll give you that. But you're not going to just have a cakewalk on Seattle, especially as the Cardinals. The Cardinals are still probably the tiniest little brother in that whole division. So you're not going to do that. You're not going to be the Browns and just come in and beat the Steelers. That's why the Steelers beat them twice. It's the big brother thing. Kyler Murray's still too young. It's not the passing of the guard yet. But I see Chase Edmonds having 216 rushes, about 1,000 rushing yards, and probably 11 touchdowns. They have a lot of weapons in that offense. I know most of their weapons are probably going to be on the IR or ICU at the end of the year now that they added J.J. Watt, A.J. Green, and they have Larry Fitzgerald and Nuke Hopkins, older receiving core. At least they have Christian Kirk, who's a younger receiver who's actually really, really good. Last year he had one of his breakout years. He was someone you could pick up on a week-to-week basis. Chase Edmonds is interesting, though, because this guy is like what you saw with David Johnson 5 years ago, when David Johnson would touch the ball 3 times. He touched the ball this game against the Carolina Panthers week 4 times, 16 carries. But then he had 5 catches for 50 yards and a touchdown that brought him 14 fantasy points. And you're like, okay. Like, he's not getting a lot of rushes, though. But last year he had 3 rushes against the Jets, 36 rushing yards, a touchdown, and he got a passing touchdown too. So he's just efficient on when he scores. When he touches the ball, he's more likely to be in the end zone, like how David Johnson was. As I said before, Kenyon Drake was out, and when Kenyon Drake was out, his fantasy numbers were 20 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points, 10 fantasy points, and 14 fantasy points. It helps a lot when you're in a PPR league because Chase Edmonds is going to probably catch the ball more frequently than not because, like I said, he's going to need a Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Kyler Murray is going to need a security blanket, and Chase Edmonds is going to be that security blanket. Kenyon Drake's gone. It's the Chase Edmonds show now. I think they'll also draft another running back, so it may keep Chase Edmonds kind of in a third down role, but that offense is a really high-powered college-based offense, and those are one of the best offenses to do in the early stages in fantasy just because it's so high-powered and like all college-y people aren't like ready for it in the NFL. So it'll be able to fool some defensive coordinators and be able to, create some separation and, more fantasy points because we're not talking about who wins the game at the end of the day. Who cares about that? We're talking about who gets the most fantasy points, who gets the most touches, who is in a fantasy-friendly offense. But the biggest sleeper going into next year was Clyde Edwards-Helaire. While he has struggled to meet the expectations of last year, I know everyone thought he was going to do good. He ended the season as the only RB to finish in the top 5 in consistency rating and the lowest in touchdown dependency. The reason being, Patrick Mahomes has way too many weapons, and it's tough. It's tough. He was a rookie. They were trying to squeeze in Le'Veon Bell. I think that since the Super Bowl happened and the way it happened, they know that they have to clean house and take things more serious. Because last year, if you're watching the Chiefs play, they weren't taking people serious. That's why their last 11 games were all within a touchdown. They literally have a record for winning 10 games in a row within a touchdown. Just within 6 points. 6 points or less is all the games they won. Because they were literally playing to people's level because they were just playing around. I think they're ending that. They're going to try to use Clyde Edwards-Helaire more. He has the second best consistency rating right behind, of course, Christian McCaffrey. Last year. I know Christian McCaffrey had a small sample size because he only played in 3 games, but he still scored over 20 fantasy points in all 3 of those games, including the 33 fantasy points he scored on the Chiefs. Clyde Edwards was consistent, but there's so much room for improvement for this guy. He wouldn't get touchdowns last year. That's the problem. He had a 17% touchdown dependency. That was the 5th lowest among the top 40 running backs, dude. The 5th lowest. So that means he's not getting the ball in the end zone. He was like basically the only other running backs he was behind, like who wouldn't get the ball as much in the end zone when it came to touchdowns, was Devin Singletary, J.D. McKissick, Austin Eckler, and Jamal Williams. That is not a great class to be part of. That means he is not getting the total touches. He only had a total of 5 touchdowns last year. Next year, he has a lot of room for improvement. I'm telling you, especially when it comes to PPR. Patrick Mahomes has publicly stated, and I probably said this like 3 times already, that he wanted Clyde Edwards-Helaire with the last pick in the 32nd pick in last year's draft. This was the draft right before the Bucs won the Super Bowl, after the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. He wanted another running back because he saw how fickle a running back could be, because he had Kareem Hunt at one point. He had it all. He had a running back who could pass, running back who pass catch, a running back who could run the ball, a running back who could kind of run block, but still he's putting his body out there, and he's a great third down running back. You could almost play him all 3 downs. Kareem Hunt was a diamond in the rough, and now he wanted to go back to that with Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Patrick Mahomes will try to use him more. I can imagine him finishing better than top 10. Top 10, he's at least... Top 10 running back is very valuable to you, because if you have a top 10 running back, you're more likely to, at least make it to a fantasy championship. He was ranked 22nd last year, only 181 carries for 803 yards. Yes, he did have that leg injury last year as well, which also was the reason why he only had 1 catching touchdown and 4 total rushing touchdowns. This year, I see him getting more touchdowns. That's what the thing is. Because the Chiefs are going to be put in more touchdown situations. I am a big believer that you should get all 3 of the Chiefs. Now you should get 4. You should get first pick, Tyreek Hill. Second pick, Travis Kelce. Third pick, Patrick Mahomes. Fourth pick, Clyde Edwards-Helaire. You'll be golden. I'm guaranteeing that you probably will go to the championship if you draft the rest of your draft right. Because you could just get Logan Thomas, Gerald Everett, or other people that I've said in the show just off a flyer, and you could just get him late in later rounds. It'll be worth it. Will Fuller, if you just want him for a year or just a couple of games, just to win you games, and then you still have the 4-headed monster on the Kansas City Chiefs, that'll help you as well. The Kansas City Chiefs are a great fantasy football offense. They were the number 2 fantasy football offense behind the Green Bay Packers, who has a great fantasy football offense, but not the best quarterback in the league in Patrick Mahomes, who I also believe will have 50 touchdowns next year. Clyde Edwards-Helaire is my biggest fantasy sleeper. Oh, I also forgot to mention Marvin Jones. Marvin Jones is someone that I like a lot too next year. He's going to be on the Jacksonville Jaguars. I know what you're thinking. Jacksonville? Oh, don't forget the culture change with Urban Meyer. And they're going to get Trevor Lawrence, who has one of the best college ratings out of a quarterback, coming out of college, basically. One of the best ratings out of a quarterback since John Elway. So this guy has a lot of potential, as much potential as John Elway, who won 2 out of 5 Super Bowls. Yes, he lost a lot, but he still won. They have Laviska Shenault Jr., who was a rookie last year, coming into next year. This is going to be his second year. Hopefully he doesn't have a sophomore slump. I don't think he will. They still have DJ Chark, who's a great receiver on the other end, who's a wide receiver 1. On top of Marvin Jones Jr., who had 984 receiving yards last year. Come on, 76 catches, 9 touchdowns. He's going to be a touchdown guy. Marvin Jones Jr. is someone you could get on a week-to-week basis that you pick up off the waiver wire, win that week, drop him. You're not worried because you know the next time someone picks him up, he's going to get you 7. But he's someone who could be a sleeper next year. He could get 1,000 yards, and he could fill that Cole Beasley role if Trevor Lawrence slings rock a lot and that Jacksonville defense stinks on ice. That was the fantasy sleepers I had going into next year. I'm always going to give you fantasy sleepers. The more I come up with, the more I'm going to give you. I'm always going to tell you the sauce going into next year. We are ready to become champions here at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. When we come back, we are going to talk about the basic stuff and terminology you should know about fantasy football, so you're not lost if you're a novice, or if there's some words you just don't understand or some things you don't get on the app of ESPN NFL, whatever you're looking at your fantasy football league. I'm going to explain it all right now on some basic tools for you here at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast, and we will be back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
And I'm glad that you are still sticking around at the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. Thank you for listening to everything that has happened. Free agency, all the fantasy implications with the free agency, where people could have went, where they didn't go, where they decided to go. Everything was talked about and went over. Now it's time to talk about the fantasy. Let's talk about the bare minimum. Let's bring it back to scratch. With fantasy football, we like to talk about, PPR. We want to say, that person's a sleeper, or, that person, I'm the commissioner, or, let's talk about the waiver order, or all this other stuff. Look, we are going to go over all the basics and all the terms and definitions you need to know to win a championship in your league next year. Hopefully, I can help you out that. We're going to touch upon the terms and definitions you should know before entering your league. Plus, we'll break down the advanced stats we use in our analysis, what purpose they serve, where they are found, and what each one indicates. Along with that, we'll discuss various types of drafts, leagues, scoring formats, etc., etc. I'm going to talk about all the basics so we could kind of just know everything when it comes to terminology and what we're talking about. So let's start with the terms first. Let's talk about ADP, which means average draft position. It's a report where players are being drafted in fantasy draft on average. So it's kind of like the median, if you know math. It's literally where everyone is drafting them in mock drafts and all the professionals, and that's kind of like where their average position, where their people are normally going to get them. They're going to get them at that ADP, at that average draft position spot. You can get them higher. It doesn't mean that that's the spot they're going to be picked at, but it's just what the normal, usual league will actually draft them at. Some drafts are weird. Like I said, I've seen someone draft Sebastian Janikowski with the first pick. Let's talk about boom or bust players. A player who could perform either really well or poorly. Also indicates inconsistencies and riskiness. Boom or bust is very crucial, like a Deshaun Jackson, like what Curtis Samuel was last year, what DJ Moore is when I was saying about it. They could score, yes, 25 fantasy points, but beware, because they'll boom, and then they'll bust and give you 8, 5, 3 fantasy points. Let's talk about what ceiling means when I say the ceiling of a player. That's the top potential they could do. Clyde Edwards-Hilaire's ceiling, I think, is going to be higher than what it was last year. He does have, he played as he was a ranked 22nd running back last year, but he has the ceiling, to me, to be a top 7, 8 running back in fantasy football just because of the offense as well. We'll talk about the floor. That's the lowest potential that someone could have. That is just like, okay, their floor is that is what Clyde Edwards-Helaire did last year. That was his floor. That's what's he's not doing, and that's like what he's not bringing out of his full potential. Let's talk about being a commissioner. The commissioner is the person who makes sure the league runs cool, good. I'm a commissioner. That's not always the case. The commissioner is the guy who pretty much runs the league, so figure out who the commissioner is, be buddy-buddy with him, and he has all the tools and everything for everyone to win. So, I think if you are a commissioner, then you should make sure you know him, get to know him, be buddy with him. My friend always gets to be buddy with me, so I get to give him the best trades, the best deals. He was able to be lucky to get Mike Davis for Antonio Gibson, a steal on his end, as I laugh snarkily to the side. If I say someone's a quarterback 1, a quarterback 2, a quarterback 3, that means the quarterback 1 is a player who's ranked inside the top 12. A quarterback 2 is someone 13-24, then so on, 25-36. That's like the rankings of quarterbacks. If I say a running back by committee, that means they are more than one headed beast. So like the Packers are an example of a running back by committee. They're going to give you Jamal Williams, or who they used to have, A.J. Dillon, and Aaron Jones, and probably another backup. That's a running back by committee. That's something you may want to stay away from all the time in fantasy. Let's talk about what a deep league means. A deep league is a league that consists of more than 12 teams. Usually the standard in ESPN is that or ESPN, NFL, wherever, is about 8-man league. People do 8-man. It's solid. 8-team league. And deeper leagues, like leagues I usually do, are 12, which make it a little harder because there's more people drafting. Therefore, there's more people going. Therefore, people are going in earlier rounds. You might not be able to get someone as good as an Antonio Gibson in the 5th, 6th round in an 8-man league. In a 12-man league, you're going to get him in like a 3rd round or a 2nd round even, maybe. Let's talk about a sleeper. A sleeper is someone who's may have a breakout season and they're undervalued in drafts. Look, you don't always have to look at the number next to the player and just think, okay, because it says 10, they're going to be the 10th best receiver or 10th best running back, 10th best quarterback next year. That doesn't mean anything. Go off what you see, the ocular test. Go by what the offense looks like, what the offense schedule is next year, and the quarterback situation and how fantasy friendly the coach is game calling is. Let's talk about streamer options. If I say stream option, whatever. It's picking up a different player at a position on a weekly basis rather than a designated starter. These players are typically just plug and play guys. So a streamer option would be if no one drafted Marvin Jones, like I said, I say get Marvin Jones for the week. Or Jonathan Taylor goes down. A streamer option is Marlon Mack for the week. Nyheim Hines. If no one drafted them in your league, you could pick them up off the waiver, start them for a week. They'll probably give you the production you need until the starting option or, the real, just the reality sits in. Because a lot of times if you're a streamer, either you're not consistent or you're just filling in for another player. Let's talk about the waivers. The waiver wire, the thing I always talk about because I love the waiver wire. I always pay attention to it. It's like the stock market. You always have to just keep looking at it because you never know the gem or what you're going to find at a low rate. I've gotten Odell Beckham, James Robinson, a lot of legendary people off the waiver wire. Justin Herbert this year, he had a good year. Not legendary, but he's still good. The waiver wire is important to pay attention to because people get hurt in practice every day. They get hurt just for this guy stubbed his toe and now pick up someone off the waiver wire. If you pick him up off the waiver wire, literally like a Chase Edmonds for Kenyon Drake or something of that nature, you could win your league just off that simple waiver wire pickup. It's very important though that you pay attention to the waiver order though. The waiver order is the order in which the teams have priority to receive a waiver wire claim. So if you're trying to pick up a lot of people in the waiver wire, and you're not making everyone count, you're going to be at the bottom. So whoever is at the top and isn't really paying attention as much, or someone who hasn't put in a claim yet, will have more of a priority to put a claim above you on certain players. So it's very important to pay attention to the waiver order as well, because the waiver order will dictate where you see you could get someone. Because say you're 10th out of 12 people, and everyone in your league pays attention, but you want the top running back that got hurt. Well, sorry, that's already out of the question. Now since you're the 10th spot, you're like, all right, let me try to get a tight end or a low-end receiver that's a streamer option that I could just pick up and it will help me out as opposed to just getting lucked out and trying to pick up this running back that I know realistically I won't get because I'm not even in a top 10 waiver order position. Waiver order and waiver wire, very important. Fantasy stats, let's start talking about those things. Let's talk about points per game. Not points per game, PPR. PPR is very important because PPR drafts are points per reception. Either you have standard scoring, which is either you let ESPN have their standard format of how they score, which is quarterback score a touchdown, that's 6 points. They throw a touchdown, it's 4 points. Any rushing touchdown, 6 points. Any catching touchdown, 6 points. But when it comes to PPR, every single catch also counts as a point as well. And I think PPR is the most fun out of all the leagues just because it gives you the most bang for your buck, the most points you can get out of everything. Why wouldn't you want high-scoring offenses? Why wouldn't you want high-scoring points? PPR is very important because you want to focus in. On people, running backs especially, if you're getting a running back or you're getting a receiver, someone who gets a lot of receptions in the year. There's two main types of PPR scoring. There's half-point PPR, which is for every point per reception. That's what PPR stands for. Point per reception. You get half a point. And there's full score, which I usually like, is 1 point. Those are usually the scoring formats that you get in fantasy football. 6-point touchdowns are always the standard, except when it comes to passing. And then there's IDP, which is individual defensive players. Those guys could score on defensive players that usually score on tackles, sacks, fumbles, interceptions, etc., touchdowns. You know the deal. I don't usually play with IDP too much, so that's why here I don't talk about defensive players as much. But I'm giving you the sauce on full defensive lineups, like I'll say, Adoree Jackson got picked up by the Giants. That's good for the New York Giants defense going into next year, especially since they're playing against an NFC East that's shown that they're not the best division out of everyone. But still, I'm not too confident because even though they got Leonard Williams and Adoree Jackson, so I'll go into it like that. But I don't really go into so Devin White, you need to pick him up this week because if you pick up Devin White this week, he'll have 6-7 tackles, 2 interceptions because Josh Allen likes to throw interceptions to outside linebackers. See, I'll get into it like that, but I'm mainly talking about a defense as a whole as opposed to individuals. I don't get into IDP as much. There's different types of leagues. There's redraft leagues where you just draft every single year, and then that's what I like to do. You just keep redrafting every year. And I like that one just the best because it keeps it good and nice and spicy and it makes it more unpredictable on who's going to win. There's other leagues like Dynasty Leagues where you keep all or nearly all of your players from the previous season, and these leagues typically focus on rookies entering the NFL. You want to do that so you could be like, okay, I'm going to draft Najee Harris as soon as he gets picked up because I want him to be on my team because I know in 3 years from now, Najee Harris is on the Steelers or Broncos. He is going to thrive and he's going to find his way in that offense and be a top 10 running back. So Dynasty Leagues are cool too. I don't really do Dynasty Leagues as much, but I will give you information on Dynasty Leagues. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, great Dynasty League pickup. Chris Carson, not a great Dynasty League pickup. Justin Jefferson, great Dynasty League pickup. DJ Moore, great Dynasty League pickup. Christian McCaffrey, still a great Dynasty League pickup. All these guys are all people you'd want in Dynasty Leagues where you'd want to play and really focus in on getting the rookies and making sure you build your team. Kind of like, say, you're playing a fantasy draft on Madden and you simulate the whole year and then you want to keep your team. You want to keep them stout. You want to be a good commissioner. You want to focus on your commissioning skills. See what your offseason trades look like. So you're like, okay, I see that. Devontae Smith's going to the Dolphins. So now I could probably trade Devontae Parker in the offseason to this guy or vice versa. I want Devontae Parker because Devontae Smith's there now. So that'll help out his stock or hurt his stock. Dynasty leagues are important in that. There's keeper leagues where you keep a select few from your previous season, which are like 1 to 4 players, which I think is pretty cool. That was one of the things where I think I might bring up to my league because I am a commissioner in one of my leagues. And a keeper league sounds cool because say you're a big Cowboy fan, you got Zeke. And you got Zeke and you're like, I don't want to get rid of Zeke. Why would I draft anyone else besides Zeke? Well, you could keep him. You could keep him for the next couple of years. You could keep one person per year. Even if it's just one guy. You at least get to keep the guy who brought you all the sauce. Say one girl in my league, she had Christian McCaffrey. I'm sure she would love to get another chance at getting Christian McCaffrey again this year. But she won't because it's not a keeper league, so she won't have him. There's different type of fantasy drafts. There's auction drafts where drafts are held and taking turns, and then you have like 200 points or like dollars, whatever the currency is at the time, whatever it says on your specific fantasy football app, where you draft people and then you auction off for them like it's a bidding war. That's a little too much math for me. I'm not doing that because I'm always I'm always too focused in and not trying to do too much math while I'm doing that. There's offline drafts where you just host a party. You just host a fun little get-together with all your friends. I've done it before. It's really, really fun. Maybe you could even set the draft there and figure out the draft position there. Maybe play a little beer pong. Figure out who deserves the 1 through 10 pick. Then you guys all draft, put it on paper. It's a little more work because the commission has to put it on paper, write it down, then figure out who's on everyone's teams, put them on the teams. That one is a little more work. I like live online drafts. That's what I usually do. Everyone, let's meet up at 9 p.m. Or not meet up. Everyone be on the computer at 9 p.m. or phone on 9 p.m. And we'll all draft for 1 hour after that. And then everyone figures out what's a good time for them. Boom, they all meet up. It usually works. That's the best and most frequent one that people usually use. You could even have people all together and still do a live online draft. And then there's auto pick drafts, which I've never done, and it's honestly kind of blasphemy to me. Auto pick drafts, really? Like you just let the computer just pick? It depends on what order you are. So you just do a randomized order because that's what the commissioner usually does at the beginning of the year. Either he puts the randomized order or he puts, these guys are in these order because we settled this outside of the draft. Or you even have the computer set, 1 hour prior to the draft, it's going to set the order for your draft already. But auto pick drafts, so as soon as you have your order, it just goes off the ADP. Like I said, the average draft position. It goes off the ADP, and then you just get the people in that order. There has no skill to it. You're just going to get, it's the luck of the draw. If Christian McCaffrey's ranked 5th on the ADP, then you're getting 5th, and you're the 5th pick, then you're getting Christian McCaffrey, and you're probably so happy and jumping up and down like a little schoolgirl. Like, there's no way. Like, I would never, ever, ever want to do an auto pick draft just because it takes all the fun out of it. It takes all the tenacity out of it. I prefer 12-man leagues just because it really exposes who knows fantasy football and who doesn't. It shows it. You're going to pick up Cole Beasley sometimes. Well, Cole Beasley is an exception this year, I guess, because Cole Beasley showed out. But you're going to pick up sometimes Breshad Perriman. You're going to pick up Keelan Cole, Laviska Shenault Jr. You're going to pick up these guys on a week-to-week basics just because maybe they're playing the Texans or maybe they're playing the Bucs used to stink on pass defense, but now it's like maybe they're playing the Saints or they're playing the Bears or anybody else that you could think of. They're just playing a weak flyer defensive for the week. That's what it's going to expose you in those 12-man leagues. Those are better too. What I prefer, I want the keeper one because the keeper one sounds fun, but live online with the 12-man league, PPR, whole point, that's where you're going to catch me because, like I said, I like the point scoring up. I'm glad that we all know all these fantasy terms, this fantasy terminology. I wanted to get back to the basics because we are here on the GSMC Fantasy Football Podcast. I cannot reiterate this enough, to win you a fantasy football championship. I can't win you a championship if I'm just talking out here and you don't know any of the terms I'm saying. So, at least I hope that helps out some people who were interested in learning fantasy football. If you already know fantasy football, I already know you. You're definitely like, what is this guy saying? You probably changed it after. But for all the people who stuck around, thank you for listening. We will be back next week with a lot of good stuff. Dude, the draft is coming up. The April draft, it's going to happen at the end of April. All of your favorite college athletes are going to, hopefully, your favorite NFL team. I don't know who I like. Imagine Mac Jones on the Patriots. Imagine Trey Lance on the Broncos. The Broncos are literally one weapon away, or one quarterback away from being a legitimate team. They just signed Ronald Darby and Kyle Fuller at cornerback, and they locked up Justin Simmons. They locked up Von Miller. They have Bradley Chubb, who was one of the leading sack leaders in the NFL. All they need is a quarterback. What about the Dolphins? The Dolphins just need Devontae Smith, or what if they get Jamar Chase? Even smarter. What if even the Lions got Jamar Chase? That would hurt Jamar Chase, but he would be by far the best receiver on that team, and he'd probably get the Justin Jefferson treatment, maybe get 1,300 yards. I don't know about Jared Goff over there, though. But we'll talk about all of the draftees and people who are coming out of the draft when it comes closer to the end of April. Thank you for listening to the Fantasy Football GSMC podcast. We are happy to have you here at the GSMC Podcast Network. We are glad that you are listening. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe us on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook. Come back next week, and we will make you a champion in next year's Fantasy Football Draft. Thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Fantasy Football Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.